SJ, welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. SJ, Stone Go, Gary Fife, Jawa Jeff Giddos.
It's Jay Morgan Taylor.
I almost caught her off guard. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio here from the brilliant, beautiful downtown. Gorgeous weather out there in Okmulgee. We have a couple things we'll be sharing with you today. First of all, we are going to get an interview that was conducted on Mvskoke Vision's Deep Dive regarding the remains at the museum at the University of Alabama in Moundsville. We want to bring you what we can on the discussions about bringing those home and the information that we've got so far. In the second portion of the program, we'll be talking with Augusta Smith. She is the choir director coordinator for the Native Praise Choir. You might have seen them appear on some of the local programming, and most recently the Miss America, I believe. And the idea is, let's find out who these folks are and share a little bit of their music. But first of all, let's get rolling with our Moundsville tape. We've got a lot of stuff to go, so we're going to have our colleague Morgan here fired up, and we'll be ready to go.
You ready, Gary?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, welcome to Livewire. This is Jared Moore, and today we're going to be talking with the Mvskoke Creek Nation Historical and Cultural Preservation Department about a big win that they've just recently scored. We're going to have Turner Hunt and Raylyn Butler, who is the manager of the department, in through the Zoom chat today. And thanks for joining me today, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
So with the... could you just give the audience like maybe a brief synopsis of what just recently happened?
Sure. Well, yesterday we had a National NAGPRA Review Committee meeting where we requested a finding of fact and cultural affiliation for the Moundville collections, Moundville and surrounding archaeological and surrounding and associated archaeological sites. And the 7 tribes that filed the joint letter presented evidence in front of the board, and the board decided that based off of a number of things that Moundville collection is in fact culturally affiliated to the Muskogean speaking tribes.
Now originally, and just for some context for the audience, we had set this interview up a couple of weeks ago when Mr. Hunt had published an article in the paper, and the link to the article is in the description of this YouTube video if you want to go check out the November 15th issue of the Mvskoke News. And in that article, he kind of talks about some of the challenges to NAGPRA repatriations, but it also talks about the STAR organization, the Coalition of Tribes. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that was, if that was instrumental in this decision?
I'm going to let Raylyn take this one. She's much more, she's
Great.
head up there in the STAR Alliance.
Sure. So the STAR Alliance stands for Southeastern Tribal Alliance for Reburial and Repatriation. It is a organization that was formed within the last 2 years. It really was the goal is to facilitate repatriation and reburial in the Southeast. There are over 38,000 remains that have been dug up from our ancestral homelands in the southeastern United States. And so it's a lot of work for tribes to go through the NAGPRA process and to make claims and to get items and ancestors returned. And so the STAR Alliance was kind of a way for us to work with one another we often found situations where museums or institutions would say, well, how is this Creek or Cherokee, or is this Choctaw, and kind of putting the tribes against each other, when our goal is really repatriation and reburial, and not so much on trying to find 100% scientific proof that these ancestors belong to this tribe. And so this is a coalition of the southeastern tribes working together to facilitate and improve repatriation work.
And just real quick, while we're talking about these topics too, I want to tell all the viewers, if you guys have a question concerning repatriation or anything in the Mvskoke Creek Nation's Historic and Cultural Preservation Department, just pop it in the chat and I'll ask it. Talking about the science part of this, because I know this is something that Mr. Hunt touched on in his article, the classification of the time periods, and also the kind of the archaeological or anthropological status of some of these artifacts within academia, and how that affects the attempts to try to get them repatriated. Could you guys just kind of talk about that a little bit? How is it I know there's some hindrances there. Is there any possible solution to those things, or?
Well, yeah. To kind of put this in context, so what archaeology has done, in order for them to understand time frames that are not their own, they've broken into these time categories, and they have some generalizations within these time categories of what people were doing. So say, for instance, if you're talking about Paleo-Indian, you're talking about highly mobile hunter-gatherers that hunt megafauna. If you're talking about the woodland period, you're talking about more sedentary people, but still, without the absence of corn, practicing horticulture and different domesticates. What they've done, though, is unfortunately, when the Mississippian time frame is from around 900 to around what some people say 1550 to 1600. That 1550 mark is because that's the age of exploration. DeSoto came through 1540. And so even though they were documenting Mississippian polities, towns with the names like Coosa, Tulsa, those are just two that popped off the top of my name, off of my head. Right. Those aren't modern day tribes. Those aren't, they separate them because they feel like there was such a total collapse of everything that what emerged after contact are not related to the previous people, even if they're their grandmothers or grandfathers, which to me is insulting. We look at, in the absence of historical records, you can still track the populations of people through the archaeological types of this and that and so on and so forth. And so when we know that this group was mentioned by DeSoto in 1540 as Coosa, and we know that they, where they moved through time and got to where they are, but there's archaeologists will sever that and say, well, these remains up here are much older and we can't tell exactly who they are. And that's caused problems for us. It's a bigger problem for Native Americans in general, because what it means is that the scientific community does not believe that our ancestors go back past contact. It's a very Western scientific a way of looking at things that completely negates, our views of the past. We've been here since time immemorial. This is our land. All of those concepts, they get put aside because Mvskoke Nation did not appear until after Europeans were here, or the Creek Confederacy. So those are the types of concepts that have been basically instituted in academia, history books all over the place, and they have very rarely, if ever, consulted with Native Americans. So they've never asked for, what's the Creek side of the story? What's the Cherokee side of the story? And so now we're at a point where we're like looking at a lot of this stuff and we're like, there's a whole side of this history that's not there. And so we fight against it's an institutionalized body of knowledge that is not complete. It's incomplete. And we're trying to add to it. And we're finding that these obstacles come up. And it's hilarious It's not hilarious. It's frustrating. I say that.
Right.
But the way in which they disconnect us from it, and then you know we're like a watered down version of our ancestors, and
Right.
that negates all of the continuity that we see, all of our ceremonies, all of our our language. Our language is thousands of years old, right?
And it seems strange too, because if you look at just other countries or other places where there was an evolution from an indigenous people into like a local population over thousands of years. Does that happen in other cultures, where it's like the academic world will come in and say, well, because this is the demarcation point for these two eras, right? The current people don't have any say in what happens with these remains, or etc. You know what I mean? Like, is there apart from, maybe, I guess you would say, does that happen in South America, or because Europe, there's long histories through there. So
I think that this is a consequence of actual having a law that focuses on repatriation, which I don't believe Europe and maybe not South America does. I think that they're in a little bit more of a controlling, it's Brazilians looking after Brazilian stuff. When we run interior in Americas, we have Americans looking at Mvskoke stuff, Americans looking at Choctaw stuff.
Right.
And so this is a completely different situation than all of those. And of course, NAGPRA has set the stage where these institutions, I'll just stop at that on that part.
Right. Well, and that's the thing too. If you're in the audience, you're watching this, you should check out Mr. Hunt's article. It goes into further depth than what we're just discussing here. But that's seems to be the problem in the nutshell. If you guys could get like a wish list of things that could be changed in NAGPRA, or changed how this system operates, what would be on that list? Because I know that there are a lot of quote unquote impacts on these universities just because these research materials or these remains, that's why they don't want to give them up, is because they won't have control over where those things are. They see that as something that they've claimed for their archives, right? But if we were in a perfect world, how could this be changed?
Well, I know that Raylan the nation has submitted some new comments on regulatory changes for NAGPRA, and I know that Raylan's a little bit more familiar with those, so if she wants to hit on that.
Yes, actually, the Department of Interior is conducting tribal consultation with all the tribes on updating new regulations for the NAGPRA law, and so they're in the process of reviewing those comments that they receive from tribes, and I think there will be even a public comment period coming up for the proposed rule changes. But it's something that has taken a decade to get to. For these proposed rule changes, we are in support of many of them because they will help streamline the NAGPRA process. But also, one of the proposed changes in particular would help us immediately with the case that we're dealing with the University of Alabama, because they have chosen not to return funerary objects. They have said that they would return the human remains, but not the belongings that were buried with them. And so the new proposed regulation would require and spell out in black and white language that human remains and funerary items must be returned when in situations where there is no cultural identity assigned to those remains. And so part of the reason, that's why we wanted to assign cultural affiliation, and all the work we've been doing with the 6 other tribes is to provide lines of evidence that shows proof that Mvskokean speaking tribes were the only people who lived in a 140-mile radius around Moundville, and that we are descendants that came from Moundville. And we all consider this to be neutral territory that we all were a part of and came out of, the mound building culture there. And so it is, there a wish list also of what things could change. Really, I think it's not necessarily for NAGPRA, but it's just for the field of archaeology. Would really wish that they would stop focusing on mortuary practices or burial practices, and really that there's more to learn from the living people and culture and not from our dead, because that's what they prioritize, are these skeletons and these funerary objects as prized possessions. And it's really cultural differences and really worldview differences on how we see those things versus how they see those things. And so it's really a kind of a clash there, and will take a lot of efforts to have more tribal people go into those fields, or to have more consultation and collaboration partnerships with each other to learn and be more respectful in research moving forward.
These type of, like the funerary objects and the remains, how does a university benefit from having those in their collection? Is there a financial benefit for them directly, or like why would they be?
All of the above.
I see. So
they charge admissions to go into the museum to view the objects. There's been over 200 publications, research work, articles, books published on these ancestors and their items, and the 100 years of stewardship from the University of Moundville, all without consultation or any kind of notice to tribes. That means people have made their whole careers, become tenured professors. Folks have really profited off of, digging up our ancestors and studying their objects.
When the University of Alabama, like you said earlier, refuses to repatriate the funerary objects, what are their reasons for that? What is it, like they're trying to find a loophole in NAGPRA to continue to have these objects and say, well, we're going to classify them as this? Like, did they give you guys any rationalizations or anything for why they should be allowed to keep the objects? And whoever wants to try to field it, or if we don't know.
Some of the correspondents from the university just basically said that they don't believe that the 1011 ruling under NAGPRA law is constitutional.
So they've already gotten.
They're saying pretty much they don't even believe that NAGPRA law.
Yeah. And they assign their own value to these things as well. So
well, just to clarify real quick, so what you guys are saying is that the NAGPRA committee has already ruled on these objects and told them to give them back, right? Is that correct?
So okay. There's two ways to approach this. To approach kind of going at NAGPRA, and one would be through cultural affiliation, in which it is very understood that the funerary objects accompany those. When you're doing cultural affiliation, there's kind of a clause in there where it allows the institution to have discretion regarding funerary objects. And so the University of Alabama is using that to retain the funerary objects. Now, to me, I can't grasp my head around this. I find it unethical, right? Like, I've been to too many funerals recently. I know what things mean when people put it with them in their, when they're being buried.
Right.
And they see them as objects of scientific study. They see them as art pieces. I mean, I believe there's a piece in their museum that's known as the most beautiful stone, the duck bowl there. It is a beautiful piece, no doubt. But these are the things that people come to Moundville to see, to pay to go visit, to buy the books, to do all of those things. So there's a level of exploitation that's associated with this that is actually kind of on its way out with museums. More museums are moving more towards interactive and cultural centers, and it just seems like the University of Alabama is kind of back,
one of the holdouts,
back a couple of generations
right
behind everyone else.
Well, that's troubling to hear that that's happening. And then you guys aren't going to be involved in legal challenges on that. Do you guys know if there is going to be a legal challenge from the tribe on it, or is that something we can't talk about at this stage?
I think that there's more steps that need to play out with current. We have the determination from the National NAGRA Review Board, and we have a letter from the university saying that they're open to collaboration and consultation. So we're hoping that this moves forward and none of that is necessary, because like we've already dealt with a lot. We don't poisoning the well even further doesn't help anybody, because we do seek a collaborative future. We want to be proud to bring our citizens out to Mountville. We want to be happy about that experience. We don't want to have this cloud hanging over our head of 5,982 individuals in curation.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very interesting, and I want to say to both you guys, I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. This is a very important issue for citizens, and I don't know if what the percentage of citizens are that know that this type of thing is still going on, but it's a ongoing process that could be going on forever, and it's something that really requires diligence and people looking at it all the time and fighting these particular battles. The remains that will be repatriated, can you guys just kind of talk briefly about, like, what do we do with it? How do we get it, and what do we do with it when we get it?
Well,
I can help.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So the Mvskoke Nation has been doing repatriation and reburial since 1999, and NAGPRA law is 31 years old, and so really started in 1995. Is that right? I think.
Yeah, that's when 1995 is when the inventories and
the inventories were due, and so anyone who had Native American human remains or funerary objects had to send an inventory out to tribes. And so as the nation started receiving these, it really kind of spurred the creation of our department in general, to receive 1,000-page documents of here's all these ancestors. And it took a while for the nation to come up with a plan and figure out what is the best way, respectful way. And really, when it came down to talking to traditional folks in the nation, that there is no ceremonies for reburial, and we're not in the business of creating new ceremonies for those type of things, and that a lot of these ancestors predate Christianity. They predate a lot of colonial forces that were put on the nation. And so the best thing that we can do is to rebury them in a respectful way, because they did have a proper funeral when they did die, and that we're not here to try to disrupt or further do anything that may disrespect their journey, to complete their journey. And so we have participated in over 32 reburials since 1999 and have helped repatriate over 800 ancestors and over 60,000 funerary objects from 6 different states in the Southeast. And we have over 30 pending cases that we're working on, which account for almost 10,000 ancestors, including this Moundville claim and case that we're working on with the other tribes. And so that's just a little bit of background, but we plan to do respectful reburial in the state of Alabama.
Okay. We're at 21 minutes right now. I wanted to ask you guys to, for your department, and this is so the citizens watching can know, do you guys have all of the resources that you need, or is this something where your program could be expanded, or, is there more that we could do that we're not because of the structure? Like, is there anything that you guys need just in a microcosm here at the Creek Nation?
The main thing that we need is land to do reburials. We don't bring people back here to our new home in Oklahoma. Those ancestors don't deserve to go on a trail of tears. But we don't have lands in the Southeast to rebury them also. And so in some cases, we're just waiting to find lands and working with federal agencies that have federal lands that we can use, because then it has a level of protection if they're buried on federal land. Federal laws apply.
Right.
So a big part of what we're doing is looking for places in the southeast and people to partner to have these lands, and maybe even purchasing our own to help rebury all these ancestors. But in general, we do have a full-time NAGPRA position, and another staff member would always be good to help. But we definitely care deeply about these issues and want to make things right. And I just wanted to say too, I think there kind of is a misconception that these ancestors were dug up yesterday or last week. A lot of these ancestors that were dug up came from when the United States was developing the country and building interstate highways and building dams and reservoir systems for energy. And when they did, we get our name creeks for a reason. They started uncovering thousands of people along these rivers and streams that were being dammed. And what they did was they dug them up and then just took them to the universities or to museums. And that's how they got there. But there are systematic excavations that have taken place too, where people knowingly were excavating burials from these sites up and until the 80s. We don't see that as much in the 90s and beyond, but it still happens. And so a lot of the work that we're doing comes from the 1940s of excavations and really the development of the United States and uncovering all these graves.
Well, I just want to let you guys know too, we've had a couple of comments in our chat, and both of them have been cheering you guys on. So
all right.
Citizens love what you're doing, and keep up the good work. Is there anything that is attached to the topic we're talking about that we haven't talked about yet that you guys definitely think needs to get in, since we're getting close to our wrap time here?
We just we talked about a wish list earlier. One of the issues is that NAGPRA doesn't apply everywhere. There are private institutions that have, like Woolaroc. Woolaroc was up on National NAGPRA Review Committee the previous session. It's a private museum, and they have stuff that people want back for repatriation purposes. It doesn't apply to state lands, so we have to rely on state burial laws for Georgia. I'll use Georgia as an example. They have a state burial law, and it actually makes them make contact with a governor-appointed board called the Georgia American Indian Council of Concerns or something like that. And these are non-federally recognized folks, self-identifying folks, and they actually get to make decisions regarding our ancestors on state lands. And so that is a wish list that I could change, is because they shouldn't have any role whatsoever in determining our ancestors.
Right. Well,
that means like mitigation, reburial, all of those things. They takes all of it out of our hands. And so, like I said, I just wanted to. That's my wish list, is to not have organizations like that subvert what the spirit of NAGPRA is.
Right. And go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that a lot of the people we work with in NAGPRA are really supportive, and they want to repatriate, and they listen to the tribes in terms of believing them for who they are. We had to submit a 100-page document that went into very fine details of why we're related to these people at Moundville. And we've never had to have any case where we had to go through that level of effort just to prove who we were. And it was kind of a hard process even for us to, we don't want to write everything down. Not everything's supposed to be written down. And it's almost as if no matter what we said, the university still is going to have opposition, because we don't have the same goals. Our goal of repatriation is not the same as their goal of documentation and research. And so it's a really outlier case. There are many nice and friendly people that are following NAGPRA law out there too. So
yes.
It's not all bad actors, but in this case, It's been a long history of non-compliance and really a lack of respect for coming to the table to discuss these important issues with us.
Well, I think that's a good note to wrap on, and I thank you guys for coming in today, and I want to extend the invitation that anytime you guys would like to come on Livewire, I would love to have you to talk about some of these issues or some of these battles that you guys are fighting, because it's one of the areas that the tribe is really doing a lot of great work and has seen a lot of advancement. It's not necessarily like a economic development type of deal, but it is something that citizens need to have done, and is not something you can just do as a hobby, basically, is kind of what I'm saying. So I appreciate you guys, and I'm going to sign out for today. And do you have something you want to add, Mr. Hunt?
Oh, no, I was just saying thank you for having us. It's been great.
Sure.
I want to try to get as much information out to the citizens as we can.
All right, everybody. Very informational stuff. What do you think, Gary?
This is the kind of stuff that is so important to us, that kind of changes thinking on who has custody, so to speak, of our ancestral remains, and we certainly think it should be us.
I agree with that. Well, everybody, we got a couple public service announcements for y'all, and we'll get them running.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angela King with the Stroke Prevention Program. With the support of the Southern Plains Tribal Health Board and Mvskoke Nation, we want to help Native Americans in our community lower their risk for stroke and heart disease. 80% of strokes are preventable just by reducing health-related risk factors. If you are interested in how to reduce your risks, please contact me at 539-299-1530. Again, that number is 539-299-1530.
All right, we're back, and Gary has a very special guest in here this morning, so I'm going to throw it over to him.
Okay. Sitting into the studios today is Ms. Augusta Smith. She is the coordinator, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Of the Native Praise Choir. Now, you might have had the chance to see and hear them at different events around the nation, a lot of things here. I understand you performed at the Miss America pageant.
Miss USA.
Miss USA, okay. Yeah, those are so different these days. And have really gained some statewide plus national recognition. So we have invited you in to talk about what your group is and what your mission is, and so to speak. So let's start there. What does the Native Praise Choir like to do? What do you perform?
You're asking me about my very favorite subject. I guess you know that. I have been the choir coordinator since its beginning, almost since its beginning. We've been together 22 years, and I was in the initial choir that was brought together with 50 women back in 1999. We were asked to sing at a state Baptist convention here in Oklahoma. And the lady that founded our organization, the Native American Link, William Pierce, went to each of the Baptist associations, which were 5 of us at the time, and she just took some of the women who were working in the churches there and tried to see how many could come together to sing in our own languages. And so we had 50 of us that showed up, and I was in that first group, and we sang. What happened was the Mvskoke language people sang together, the Cherokee women sang together, and then the Chickasaws and Choctaws sang together. So we sang separately. And then we were asked to sing again a year later at another meeting, and we did that again. And then we were asked to sing on a national level, and that's when we decided we need to become a choir. And so in 1999 was our initial meeting time together, and so this is 22 years for us, and we have certainly grown together, and we sing now each of us, every choir member sings all the languages together.
Oh,
we
my.
are a choir, and that means the Choctaws sing the Mvskoke hymns. We sing the Choctaw and Cherokee hymns. Cherokee women sing Mvskoke hymns and Choctaw hymns. We all sing one another's hymns as a choir.
That's the kind of thing you usually can hear at a church.
Yes.
Someone will, usually a pastor will call for a song, and someone in the congregation, and then they'll call out, Choctaw hymn number 14,
Right.
And people
Right.
know what we
Right.
got. The chance to hear it now, I think, is probably what we need to do, is kind of give our listeners an idea what do you sound like. So let's roll a little bit of your music and see what we got here.
Before the coming of the bell ringing from the church steeple, our Indian people were called to worship with the sounding of the cow's horn. The horn was blown by the church deacon as he prayed for God to bless the worship experience. Following the sounding of the cow's horn, the Mvskoke Indian people would oftentimes begin the worship with an old familiar hymn, Hallelujah, a song of praise, recognizing all who would praise together one day as we anticipate meeting the Savior, Jesus Christ.
We were chatting here while the music was playing about how that's a really popular song. A lot of people have heard it, and I almost jumped in myself there. And I don't know much about it, but it was so familiar and so good. Do you find that's the reaction of your audiences a lot to this kind of thing?
Always, and we have found over the years that many of our other tribes, are familiar with that as well, and you'll see many of them join in and sing. And we invite that because we know that the hymns that we sing are congregational hymns that have been sung in the churches. And that's the way we grew up. When we started out, we had 3 women who were the lead singers. And we sung from them because that's how we saw it in our churches. Someone led out and everyone would join in and sing. So we made sure that that's how we did it because we wanted to follow what we knew to be the tradition among our native churches. And we still sing. I lead now for all 3 languages because I know all 3, and they do too, though. And it's been great to come together. We've had, when you think back to 22 years ago, we had women, especially among my Mvskoke people, that I saw when I was younger and growing up, who were part of that choir. Henrietta Marshall over at Tuskegee Church at Eufaula was among those who helped us. At the time, I was in the younger set. And although I knew them because I heard my parents speak fluently in the home, and I knew the hymns, I heard them all the time. But it was great to have somebody like her. Helen Kuhn, the wife of Philip Kuhn, was one of the singers. And then there were ministers who traveled with us, and they prayed over us. And that last song that's on that CD is the dismissal hymn. Beautiful hymn, beautiful hymn. And we followed the tradition of singing through that hymn one time, and then going back again to the chorus, I guess you'd call it. And Raymond Beaver, who was the pastor at the time of Mvskoke Baptist Church at Eufaula, he led in prayer in the Mvskoke language, just as we had seen it as we grew up. That's what we would see, we would witness. So we did it as we saw it and knew it to be. And it's beautiful. And over the years, we are sisters. We call ourselves sisters. There are now 54 of us who sing together, but we represent 17 tribal nations. So it's not just the 5 tribes who sing together. We have other women who have joined in with us and have chosen to learn the hymns. We're starting to think about adding in Pawnee, Kiowa hymn. We're starting to look at some of our Western tribes, adding some of their songs that we've heard many times and we love. And so that's one of the things we really want to do, is add that flavor, I guess you'd say, of their tribal nations to what we do.
Let me ask Morgan here. I saw a smile come across your face as we heard that. Is this familiar with you? Did you grow up hearing some of this stuff?
So I kind of grew up more ceremonial, not really in the church, but yeah, I do. My cousin, he's a older pastor. A lot of people know him, Mitchell Taylor.
Yes.
Yeah. And so there were times where we did, attend some church, and, I really enjoyed listening to those. I was kind of curious, bringing all those kind of different tribal nations together. What is that like? Is there a lot of different experiences, stories?
Oh, it's a sisterhood. It really is. And we had a couple of women join this year, and we have women who step back maybe for health reasons. In fact, let me tell you, we are really wanting to see our younger generations come in. But we also realize maybe it doesn't have the same meaning for them because they did not experience hearing the language spoken in their homes when they were growing up like we did, our generation. We realize that I'm 70 now, and that I'm in that last generation of hearing that fluent language spoken in the home, and heard the pastors speaking in English and in our Mvskoke language. And so it was it's very much a part of who I am and what we do. And to tell you that we need our younger women, girls, to really step up and start. We pray that they'll have that desire to learn the hymns that we sing, because right now 77% of our choir is over 50, and of that 77%, 42 of our 54 members are over 50. And 32 of those are over 65. Our choir ranges in age from 9 to 91 right now.
Gosh, it's such a wonderful opportunity to preserve the language.
That's what
languages.
We know this is very much a part of our culture. It's very much who we are. Just like I said, when I grew up being in the church all my life, and I saw the men sit on one side and the women sit on the other, and I heard every sermon in English and Mvskoke language. She mentioned Mitchell Taylor. That's how he preaches. I hear him. I've heard him before. And sing. He can sing too. And we love to hear the men sing. We love to hear them.
My father and mother both were choir members at different places. Morgan brought up an interesting thought that I think that our peoples are still dealing with, separation and religious conviction. We dearly want the traditional part of our religions to remain, because that's part of who we are. But so many of our peoples have followed a different path into the Christian church and different denominations and things like that. Does that ever come up? Does that ever create a
We've really not
challenge?
had, mainly because so many of us that are in the choir, we didn't grow up in a traditional setting, as in the traditional grounds or anything like that. We didn't grow up that way. I don't know anything but who I am, and that's being a part of the church, and because my father was a pastor, my grandfather was a pastor. I don't know which of in my ancestry, on both sides, my father was, my father's side is Baptist faith, but also he had Presbyterian. My mother's side, Methodist, and so that's all I ever knew. And many of our members are in this, are the same. And so we really don't have that. We have one that did grow up. She did go to the grounds when she was younger with family, but she made a decision in her own life that this was the path she wanted to follow.
Sure.
And she has chosen that for life,
I wanted to ask you about, let's call it professionalism in your presentations. The reason I ask is I've said both my parents were singers. My father was a wonderful bass, and my mother was a soprano, one of those voices that reached the heavens. And she was the choir director. And when she worked in rehearsals and things like that, she tried to sharpen the skills of people. Like, okay, well, you got to be in tune. You have to hit the right note and hold it for a certain amount of time. Really making them sound really, really sharp. And this was different from the usual Indian choirs who just everyone came in and sang, and that was it, which is fine, But she took it, elevated it to another level, and I noticed that. Within a presentation I heard here during a Veterans Day celebration. Okay. Now, is that something you teach in like pitch and tempo and things like that?
I'm the one who actually comes in as the lead singer, and I'm telling you, that's got to be a grace of God. That's all I can tell you, because I am not a professional. I am not. I would never say that, because I'm not. However, I did travel with the Bacon Choir. That was my first. Well, my first was singing loud in the church as a little girl, trying to beat out my cousin and see who could sing the loudest, right? And then, but I did join the Bacon Choir, and we traveled with the choir while I was in college there. Loved Bacon, and that kind of gave me. They actually had very much a part in me feeling like I was confident enough to sing and even lead out. They gave me many opportunities, and then to be asked to sing in this, which we didn't expect to be a choir when we came together, and now here we are 22 years later, and I'm leading. I'm the choir coordinator. I did not see that coming, and we choose to sing a cappella without instruments. Now we have introduced a native flute. One of the Cherokee women will play the native flute from time to time, and so in some of our hymns. But we choose to be a cappella because that's how we heard it in our churches. And we choose to stay as close to that as we can whenever we're singing. Now, we've implemented some songs, some of our hymns. We've taken some of the English hymns, and over time, you might hear At the Cross, and we sing it in the 3 languages. Amazing Grace, we sing it in the 3 languages, which we know in Mvskoke languages Come Holy Spirit, Heavenly Dove, and if you make the interpretation, but it's to the tune of Amazing Grace.
Now, we were getting ready to share that on the show here, and is this like a Creek version, Cherokee? And the reason I say that is to understand that Amazing Grace is like a national song for the Cherokee Nation.
That was our very first song that we all put together. That was the very first one that all of us put together. And we sing 1 verse of each language is what we do.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and share this off of your CDs, which you have several available, right?
All right. Death lies
Such a moving piece. I don't know who wrote it, but they were genius did it. And I've heard so many versions of it, including military bands and Scottish bagpipes, and then of course I think the Mormon Tabernacle Choir did it, and all kinds of people. And then you've heard Indian congregations sing it. It's like a universal hymn that was done. Yes. And during this presentation here, we heard the distinct quality of each language coming through, and that's what you were after?
Mm-hmm. It's exactly what we're after, but we also want to make sure that part of why we did something like you just heard is that we are trying to draw in the younger generation, mm-hmm. because some of them are familiar with some of these contemporary Christian hymns, and so we're wanting to draw them in. We do another one, Give Me Jesus, that is totally in Mvskoke language. Mm-hmm. And a few years back, I asked Edwin Marshall to help me to translate that, or if he would actually do that for us. I sent him the song in English and said, would you be able to translate this into our language? And he said, let me work on this. And he did, and he sent it back. And I think he was as excited as I was when I heard it. And God really just took this song, and Maureen Jackson from Eufaula and her daughter, Tussa Scraper. Tussa used to be Miss Mvskoke Nation. Her name was Tussa Beaver. And they are the soloists in these, but the whole choir comes in to sing parts of it as mm-hmm, well. Mm-hmm. Give Me Jesus, and it's just one of the most beautiful hymns we've ever done.
Is that on this CD?
Yes, it is. It's Give Me Jesus. Jesus Amish is what it's.
Oh, while we're waiting for that to fire up, I was listening again, and I suppose my mother spoiled me, and like, if it ain't just right,
yes,
it's not quite.
Yes.
And I noticed that, bang, every note was right on the money. It was like you didn't miss a beat. It was all clean and pure, and just different parts of the choir. I guess you presume you have altos.
That's God. It's not me. It's not the quality of me. I'm Gus. I'm called Gus. But it's how we really believe that that's just we were meant to be. That's
right.
How it is.
Well, it's quite an inspiration.
In the morning, when I rise, at Hayatkin, Alegayo. Give me Jesus.
you were joining in silently there. I was going to say, like, fire that mic up and go ahead. I mean, it's such moving material.
It's truly beautiful. Yeah.
We are so blessed that God has just taken good care of us. We have traveled many, many miles. We love that Mvskoke Creek bus, by the way. We travel in that Mvskoke Creek bus, a lot of times Mvskoke Nation bus, and we're looking forward to getting in it. COVID has just halted us. It's put a halt because of our ages. Has a lot to do with it. We've had to be extra careful. Right now, we're asking that everyone that wants to continue singing in the choir is vaccinated, because we want to make sure everyone is well taken care of. And because when we hit the road, we don't want that to be a stumbling block for us in our health.
Right.
And so I really take that as a mission of mine personally, to make sure everyone is well taken care of. It's amazing how God has used us across the nation, the way He's let us travel from the beginning. Gone to Washington, D.C. in our very first tour, sang in Constitution Hall. We didn't expect things like that to happen.
Right, yeah.
Went to England to sing in Birmingham, England, and London area. We sang there. Some have been to Canada. Some went to Ukraine. But also across Oklahoma and across the nation. God has just taken such good care of us in the way that we've traveled, and we just draw so close to one another. I love seeing we are not cliquey. We are not cliquey women, and we just draw. It doesn't matter what tribe we are.
Yeah.
We just draw together.
And about the minute we have left, if someone was interested in having you perform for them or an appearance, how would they get in touch with you?
They can email me at nativeamericanlink@gmail.com. Native American Link, LINK, because our acronym is Living in Neighborly Kindness. At gmail.com, nativeamericanlink@gmail.com, and I will respond. 918-931-2218, Augusta Smith.
Well, I tell you what, I'd like to wrap this show up with some more of their music and our outro as it usually comes. So you get to...
I just gave her CDs back.
Oh, never mind. Well, then you sing it then.
You don't want me to sing it. You don't want me to sing it.
Get Augusta to knock out a version of Amazing Grace. And I think that's pretty much done for the show. What kind of time we have left?
We have 10 seconds, Gary.
All right, outro. We're going.
All right.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.